So with Bauer, we want to think about him as basically an example for us of anti-Judaism. And so we want to say, what does he mean by anti-Judaism? He's thinking about it not just in terms of theology or anything like that. He's actually someone who, in his position in the Enlightenment, thinks that religion is part of the past. And so to be part of a truly modern nation, Bauer thinks everyone has to give up their practice of religion. He, however, doesn't really see the differences between the social and political position and advantages that Christians have versus Jews, either because he doesn't want to or because he can't. So, first of all, he argues that Jews are to blame for any suffering they've had thus far because they practiced Judaism. He says that they provoked their suffering by their adherence to their law, halakha, their language, to their whole way of life. Right, so he's really saying Jews are at fault for having suffered so far because they were Jewish. That if they hadn't practiced Judaism, then they wouldn't have been oppressed. That's a crazy thing to say. In that it doesn't suggest that people are allowed to be anything, particularly in a previous time period. He doesn't suggest that Christians, right, that any suffering that Christians experience, he wouldn't put in the same kind of perspective. However, he does argue that both Jews and Christians need to give up their religion to deserve citizenship, right? So there are other people who argue that no, if you deserve citizenship, it's inherent, that it's just a part of human dignity, that all people can become citizens, right? But we're seeing the way that people think through and thought through in the 19th century the place of Jews in their imagined nationhood. So he kind of concludes by saying that, on the next page, on 298, he says, Jews and Christians can consider each other and treat each other as men, humans, he wouldn't have thought that, but as men, only when they have given up the special nature which separates them and enjoins them to eternal segregation, when they acknowledge the common nature of man and consider humanity as their true nature. Right, so he sort of jumps down and he says, in the same manner, the Christian as a Christian cannot gain human rights. That he wants to say that what is being granted as citizenship is human rights. This is not actually the case, though. What's being granted are German rights, French rights, and the influence of what people think the structures of those places should be, has already been emancipated, right? The Christians have already been emancipated and become citizens. They are the first, and then even when the serfs are free, that these are largely Christians. And so Jews have a totally different set of obstacles to citizenship, but he doesn't acknowledge that. And in his critique of Christians as being undeserving of human rights, he doesn't really say Christians shouldn't have citizenship until they give up their Christianity, even if he really does hate Christianity, that, as you can see in the footnotes at the end, he was a radical critic of the New Testament, that he was dismissed from his teaching position at Bonn in Germany, all these kinds of things. So with Bauer, he's critical of religion in general. He thinks that's the problem. And yet he doesn't do any kind of sophisticated evaluation of what is the place of religion and having organized this new German state and German society.